Yo, what's up? What's good? You are now tuned in to the Keys and Seeds podcast, where we discuss music, mental health, and spirituality from the perspective of Ken, the artist, as well as Ken, the person behind the art. And of course, if you support the pod, then you too are also Ken. Be sure to join the conversation and follow the pod at Keys X Seeds Pod. And as always, knowledge and kindness is key. This is episode 2, part 2 to episode 1. And considering this is part 2, I do want to circle back around to part 1 before I get into part 2, just to better summarize the point that I was trying to get across with episode 1, because as I'm learning, this is all new to me. I do feel like I was all over the place with episode 1. But before I get into that, one of the things that I learned was to introduce myself before just getting into shit. So again, if you're just tuning in or, you're still getting to know me, again, I am Ken. My real name is Kennedy. My artist name is Kendall. And people call me Ken for short. So you can call me either Ken or you can call me Kendall. I'm telling you guys my government name because I'm going to be sharing a lot of who I am on a personal level with you guys. But I don't like being called my government name. I'm not one of those weird people who snap at people who call me my government name, because that's what the fuck my parents named me. But I don't know, people in my close circle don't actually call me my name. People literally either call me Ken or some variation of Ken, or they call me Kendall. So it's kind of weird when people say my government name, especially when I'm not close to them. So Kendall or Ken. But yeah, so with that being said, I also too want to get better with time. But of course, my Virgo mind that wants to be a perfectionist, see, already fucking up. The Virgo in me that wants to be a perfectionist at everything wants to just get on camera and get on the mic and just do this shit right and perfect every time. But I know that that's not going to happen, especially not overnight. But anywho, like I said, before getting into this episode, and this episode being part 2 to the first episode, I do want to just recap episode 1 a little bit first, just to get my point across more, because I feel like I could have done that better. So again, this podcast is about music, mental health, and spirituality. On the music tip, as an artist myself, a lot of these episodes are going to be me doing a deeper dive into my music and the themes surrounding my music. What headspace I was in when I wrote it, etc., etc. And also, too, not to jump ahead of myself, but I'm going to have guests on the pod as well. And with me talking about my music, of course, you guys can expect, hopefully, I don't know if I can get everybody, but I'm going to try, of course. But hopefully, too, as I'm talking about my music, I also plan to have the artists that I work with on the pod to discuss, what they added to, the song. And they're also going to be on the pod so that they can share more of their perspectives on, other topics as well, but also too, so you guys can get to know who they are as artists and creatives. But yeah, so music, I will be discussing my own music. I also will be providing my opinions and takes on music, sharing with you guys music that I'm listening to, things of that nature, because I'm a fan first, and I'm a big music enthusiast, mainly hip-hop and R&B, but all types of music, but mainly rap is what you guys can expect me to talk about, because I rap, but I also sing as well. And yeah, so music, that's what I will be discussing about on that tip. Mental health, I will be essentially growing out loud on this podcast, me growing as a person, me healing is something that's super important to me. And me growing and healing as a person is something that I'm super committed to. So this podcast is going to be like a safe space for me to discuss certain things that might be taking place in my life. But I'm going to share my experiences from a place of me sharing with you guys what I'm learning from the things that I'm experiencing. Because obviously, like I said, I know I'm still young. I still have a lot of life to live. But I do still believe that I have a lot of knowledge and wisdom that I can share with others that I feel would be helpful to others. But also, too, first and foremost, this is my safe space. So again, I'm doing this for me. I'm going to be healing out loud simply because that's what I want to do. But I hope through me sharing my experiences and more about who I am and, my testimony, my story, of course, I pray that, it helps or blesses someone else out there in some way. So yeah, I will be discussing my own personal experiences, but also just in general, mental health is something that I'm really passionate about. So I will be discussing an array of topics, if that's the word I'm looking for, array. I will be discussing numerous topics that relate to mental health and, relationships and, things of that such. But I will also be approaching the conversations that I have on this pod from a place of looking at things from a deeper level in understanding. So with that said, the spirituality aspect comes in to play because my faith is super important to me, and I'm naturally just a deep thinker of everything, and I do believe that everything is spiritual. Like, when people be like, oh, it's not that deep, like, I hate hearing that shit because it is that deep. It is that deep. But anywho, I feel like I got my point across with that as far as the general, topic of what this podcast is about. Healing, growing, evolving, growing in your faith, especially at that, and all things music and art as a creative. Also, like I said, my plan is to drop weekly episodes, specifically on Sundays. I also plan to eventually do a book club. And of course, I also want to host different type of events. So community give back events, but also to just different type of events that aren't necessarily focused on giving back to the community and are more so like social events, but obviously are still focused on community. And what else? Yeah, eventually, of course, I want to start a Patreon because being transparent, financial support would be very much appreciated. But obviously, I'm not rushing into that because I'm not doing this for the money. But just to have more of an intimate community within the community, I feel like Patreon would be perfect for something like the book club and, having more intimate conversations about the things that I talk about on this pod. And yeah, I'm actually not too familiar with Patreon, but just shooting out the ideas that I currently have in mind. And of course, like I said, guests will be on the pod, artists that I work with, artists that inspire me, people in general whose mind I would love to pick and I feel would have great conversation. And of course, I want to have, professional, mental health advocates, if that's the word I'm looking for. Obviously, you feel me? I'm not licensed in anything. I'm not a therapist, nothing like that. But of course, I think it would be great to have some professionals on here to add to the conversation of what we'll be talking about. And yeah, also too, circling back around to me interviewing creatives, specifically creatives that I work with. It's not just going to be other artists that rap or sing. Of course, I also want to get producers that I work with, engineers, graphic artists, anybody who I work with in any way creatively. I would love to have them add their perspective as well, because I feel like us artists that make music, we already are sharing our perspective in a unique way because people hear our words. But the people that are more so behind the scenes, like the producers, etc., like we never really hear conversations from them. Like of course we do, but me having guests on the pod that's included in my creative process in different ways instead of just the artists that I work with, as far as like us both rapping or whatever. I want to have, those creatives on the podcast as well. And what else was I about to say? Also, too, I want to have brands, people who have brands that align with what I do. So you don't have to necessarily be a creative or, a mental health, advocate or anything like that. But like I said, just people who I feel I will be able to have interesting conversations with. But again, going back to episode 1, the word is community. So anyone who has a brand that, I'm a fan of, or, whatever work that you have going on, if I see someone who's doing work that I'm a fan of, or, like I could get behind that, like I respect what you're doing, I would love to shout you out and have you come on and promote your brand, because I don't want this platform to just be about me. But yeah, so with that being said, I think I have all of that out the way. And if I'm timing things correctly, we're not even at the 15-minute mark. So yeah. Moving on though. So episode 1 was pretty much before I get into that, I don't want to, get too ahead of myself. But just already I feel more comfortable. Like I had so many nerves, like, oh my God, this is episode 1, and this is only episode 2, but I already feel more comfortable. And I'm sober. I was sober when I started the episode, but I remember I also took that shot, and the bitch low-key was like, burn the fuck up. But I'm here, I'm present, and I feel more comfortable. I feel more in my groove. But yeah, so with that being said, this is episode 2, part 2 to episode 1. Which was, of course, the introduction to this podcast. And now part 2, episode 2, part 2, whatever, is more of an introduction to who I am as a person. And yeah. So I already, of course, introduced myself to you guys. And I feel like just based off of the first episode alone, even if you don't personally know me or have been following my journey in any way, I feel like if you're someone that just tuned into the first episode not knowing anything about me, I'm pretty sure y'all gained some type of something. Y'all learned something about me from the first episode without me intentionally talking about myself. But this episode would be me intentionally giving you guys more of a background on who I am, how I grew to become the person that I am today. Giving you guys like a little mini timeline summary of, my life up until this point and, who I am now. So, like I said, real name's Kennedy, artist name Kendall. You can call me Kendall or Ken. I was born September 15th, 1998. So that makes me currently 24. I will be 25 this year, 2023. And that makes me a Virgo. Shout out to all the Virgos. And of course, if you're into astrology like I am, also to quick sidebar, circling back around to episode 1. Of course, I already told you guys that this podcast will be centered around talks of spirituality, or that will be the perspective that I approach things from. But also, too, just another disclaimer. I know that everybody's beliefs will not align with mine, and that's fine. I don't judge nobody for what they got going on. And all I ask is that, you feel me, I receive that back. If you feel as if you aren't going to be able to gain something still from these conversations based off of, what I believe or, what I got going on, then maybe this podcast is not for you. But like I said, we will be discussing God, scripture, but also just approaching things from more of a open-minded and spiritual standpoint versus the constructs of religion. So, yeah, and I will leave that there. But circling back around to me talking about myself, obviously, 9/15/98, that makes me a Virgo. And for the folks out there who are also into astrology like I am, that also makes me a Pisces rising and a Cancer moon. And I'm going to leave it right there. But, yeah, so what else can I say? So, of course, I had notes, but I'm like, it shouldn't be that hard to talk about myself. And, of course, I don't want to be all over the place again. But, yeah, so I grew up single-parent household, me, my mom, and my younger brother. And these episodes are going to be time sensitive. So at the time I'm recording this, I don't plan to release these episodes until, some time after when I'm recording this. But I'm gonna just let y'all know today is January 18th. And today is actually my little brother's birthday, who I grew up with. So shout out to my brother Corey. You know how siblings, you feel me, are. But yes, kid, I love you. Shout out to you. Happy birthday. But yeah, so I grew up single parent household. My mom, my younger brother, whose birthday is actually today. So also shout out to Capricorns. I fuck with Capricorns. Mac Miller is a Capricorn. But yeah, so it was really just us three. I have other siblings. I'm only close with one other sibling that I have. And I think total I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 siblings. And then I have like nieces and nephews, but my family is kind of estranged, and I don't really have relationships with a lot of people in my family, just being honest. And I feel like that alone has kind of just helped. It has impacted the way I have developed as a person. I'll say that, as far as it impacting the relationships that I have. Yeah. But yeah, what else can I say? Of course, you guys know, as a kid, I always was into writing. You would never not see me with a notebook or a pen. So it went from me having a diary / journal to that turning into me having a blog, which I mentioned in the first episode, and me starting this podcast now is kind of just full circle, because literally everything the type of content that I was putting out with that blog is literally what I'm going to be doing now with the podcast, just in a 2.0 version, if that makes sense. But yeah, so they ended up turning into a blog that I had, which was called Think Unconfined. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought about that name when naming this pod, but I'm like, nah, I need something completely new, something completely fresh. But yeah, that's why it feels good to finally be doing this now, because I feel like everything is coming back around full circle. But yeah, so I grew up as a kid loved to write, also loved to read, which I feel as a kid, of course, that only helps with, your imagination that you already have as a kid. But also, too, I was into reading because reading allowed me to escape the reality that I had as a kid. But yeah, so I went from keeping a diary and journaling to that turning into a blog, that turning into poetry, that turning into music. Didn't really have the confidence to put out my music, but eventually worked up the confidence to put out my music. To me now doing music I started putting music out at the end of 2018, and it's now 2023. So that means 19, 20, 21, 22. I've been doing music a little over 4 years now, and it's something that I'm still passionate about. So just to, I guess, clear up any type of confusion that there might be, I don't want anybody to think that I'm abandoning the music for this podcast. That's definitely not what's happening. But yeah, although I'm very passionate about music, I've always been the type of person who never felt like they knew what they wanted to do, because I feel like I've always been into a number of things. But music has been that one thing that's been consistent. I feel like I'm the type of person, like, I'm quick to find something new that I'm interested in, and then eventually, like, I get bored with it. But music was something that, like, I, like, fell in love with. And then from there, like, just seeing other people's, response to me releasing music, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is something that I should probably keep doing. And then from there, like, I just fell in love with it, and I've had a passion for music since. And music is something that I see myself doing long term. Like, when I picture myself in the future, like, not working for someone else and being able to wake up every day and do what I want to do, the life that I envision for myself is me being a successful recording and touring music artist. Like, that's what I see. And I feel as if everything that I pursue are really just other things that I wish to pursue creatively, because I don't want to just limit myself to just music. But also, too, I look at everything as an investment back into the music. So anything that I'm, like, any other stream of income that I have coming in my mind, I know that I want to put I know that I want to put that money back into my music, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's a little crash course about me. Also, of course, I mentioned to you guys that I worked at a radio station. I think I did. So, growing up as a kid, was into writing, was into reading, and my writing just morphed into different types of writing or mediums of creating through my writing, if that makes sense. And growing up as a kid, I feel like that kind of made me a quiet kid. I was naturally like a kid that was, like, quiet into myself, but I always had, like, a lot on my mind. I feel like I was naturally, like, outcasted. Like, I wanted friends, like, I wanted to be social with people, but I feel like I was that kid that, like, nobody really wanted to, like, be a friend to, if that makes sense. So, like, I naturally was kind of just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll be by myself. But also, too, I also knew that I had the personality of, like, even though I want friends, like, at the same time, like, I like being by myself. So it was both. I wanted to be more to myself as a kid, but also, too, I felt like I didn't fit in. So I naturally was just to myself. But as a kid, because of everything that I was going through in my childhood, but just also, too, because I felt like I wasn't necessarily, like, seen or, understood by anybody, like, writing was my outlet. And like I said, that eventually turned into a blog, because when you writing shit by hand, like, your hand cramps up. And even though I loved writing, I'm like, I'm about to start typing. And if anybody is familiar with Wattpad, I also, this is kind of embarrassing, but I also used to write fan fiction on Wattpad. And I was going to delete everything on there because I'm like, this is so embarrassing. But I'm like, fuck it. Like, that's who I am. Like, that's who I was at one point. So there are some fan fictions out there on Wattpad that I created. But yeah, like, I feel like once I got onto Wattpad, because like I said, I like to read, I like to write and read. So once I got onto Wattpad, I'm like, you feel me? Like, I can get behind the whole typing thing. And once I got into blogging, like, I loved the fact that I was able to, like, share the things that I was physically writing, like, out with the world, you know? And I loved blogging. Like, that was my shit for a minute. But then eventually I was just like, I get tired of typing too. Like, it's very tedious sometimes. And then you have to sit there and read and proofread everything that you just fucking typed up. And even after I thought that I caught every goddamn typo, the shit to be published, and then I'm reading it back again, you know, pretending that I'm, you know, someone, you know, coming across my blog, and I still be catching shit. And that shit was irritating me. And in my mind, I was like, I wish I could literally just get on a mic and just talk about what the fuck I want to talk about. And I remember at this time, YouTube was first becoming a thing. I can't remember if I already mentioned this or not in the first episode, but I remember around this time, YouTube, you know, first was a thing. Like, I literally remember when YouTube debuted it. And around this time, I remember watching Chloe and Halle, Tori Kelly, people like them, like, come up on YouTube doing singing covers. And I'm pretty sure I also mentioned in the first episode that I grew up in church. So that's kind of where my love for music came from too, like singing in church. And once I was seeing, you know, what people were doing on YouTube as far as like getting on there and like talking about themselves and like doing covers, I was like, I want to do that. But I only got on YouTube to post covers. I was too afraid of like getting in front of a camera and talking, because I'm like, I feel like I would have to organize my thoughts. And obviously with me starting this podcast, like, I'm recognizing that, of course, that's what I have to do in order to make sure this podcast is not all over the place. But also too, I was just like, I don't know if people are necessarily going to listen or like respect or accept my opinions or like things that I want to talk about. Like, I felt like at that time I felt more comfortable with just doing singing covers because I felt like that was more socially acceptable. I don't know. But moving on from there, I ended up working at Radio 1 in Indy. Also too, again, all over the place, I am from Indianapolis, Indiana, Far East Side to be exact. And yeah, before 6th grade, I'm gonna circle back around to the radio point, but I feel like it would make more sense to give you guys a timeline. So honestly, I don't remember shit about my life. That's a lie. I remember bits and pieces. I don't remember much. Anything before 6th grade, I don't really remember much about my life. Like, I remember like bits and pieces, but like 6th grade, I went to Raymond Park. 7th and 8th grade, I went to Stony Brook. And of course, if you're not from Nap, then you probably don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But if you know, you know. From Indianapolis, Indiana, Far East Side to be exact. And as I start naming schools, of course, if you're not from Nap, probably don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But if you know, you know. But yeah, 6th grade, I went to Raymond Park. 7th and 8th grade, I went to Stony Brook. After I left Stony Brook, and what's ironic is I ended up working at Stony Brook, and I'm going to circle back around to that. But 7th and 8th grade, I worked at Stony Brook. Went to Warren Central all of my high school years. After I left Warren, I went to Ball State. I briefly dropped out, I want to say 2018. Around the same time I started doing music, and I dropped out for rhythm and flow, which I also will eventually talk about. But went to Ball State and temporarily took a break because an opportunity came about, and I'm like, shit like this don't come about every day, and I can always come back to school. So left school for that. That, of course, ended up not working out. If you know, you know. Of course, I'm going to talk more about that later, because I'm sure there might be some people listening to this like, girl, what the fuck is you even talking about? But briefly left Ball State for rhythm and flow. That ended up not working out, so I was out the rest of that semester that I had took off. During that time, I ended up working at Stony Brook, and eventually went back to school, finished my senior year, and graduated 2020, top of when the whole pandemic shit was happening. And that shit was crazy because I wasn't even able to finish my senior year of college on campus. I graduated in May of 2020. The pandemic and everything, that was like March of 2020. So before March even hit, or I think like early March, like around that time, I literally had to move all of my stuff back home. And I was taking some hard ass classes my last year. And the class specifically that was kicking my ass was media law. If you know, you know. And I'm like, damn, the shit that I'm learning is actually some shit that I'm gonna need because it's media law. You feel me? But like, yeah, so like senior year was already stressful for me because I'm like, damn, I don't want to feel like I'm not going to be able to graduate because of the classes that I'm taking. Like, I already felt like a bitch was underwater. Then the pandemic hit. I had to pack up all my shit and finish school at home. And I'm like, I have more discipline living on campus. If I'm at home and I have to hold myself accountable to rolling over and still getting this shit done, obviously, of course, I had to do that, but it just made everything 10 times harder. And then, of course, with the pandemic, I feel like a lot of shit around that time was up in the air. And yeah, like that was a stressful time for me to be graduating college. But a bitch graduated. I got my degree. And after I graduated college, of course, I'm like, okay, it's time to actually be an adult now and like figure out what it is I want to do with my life. Because I had a whole plan before I graduated and all of that shit got scrapped. And that plan circling back around to me working at a radio station. I was working at Radio 1 in Indy. When did I start working there? I don't even remember when I started working there. I really don't. I'm going to look it up because I know I have it in my phone. But long story short, I was working at Radio 1 Indy, and I had this whole like plan of working my way up at Radio 1. I started working there June of 2018. I graduated high school in 2016. So I want to say that was my junior year when I started working there. But anywho, June of 2018 is when I started working for Radio 1 Indy. And also too, while at Ball State, that's the college that I went to. Can't remember if I mentioned that or not. I just know I mentioned going to college. But yeah, while at Ball State, I was working for WCRD. I had on the shirt for the first episode. Ironically, that wasn't even planned. But yeah, so I was working at Radio 1 and I was working at WCRD on campus. And I had this whole plan of, because at that time, I was working as a promotions assistant. So I would be a part of the crew that would like pack up all the equipment and shit and like be a part of like the street team, essentially, like be the face for the station at different community events and, you know, help promote the station. And I really enjoyed that job. Like, it was a lot of fun. You know, I got to get out and, you know, meet different people And it was always different type of events that we would work. And yeah, I loved that job, but I knew, even though I felt as if I wasn't as confident yet, I knew that I eventually I saw myself as someone who was on the mic. You feel me? I'm like, I don't necessarily want to be on TV or, in front of a camera, but I feel like with radio, it's like, yeah, people might know me as a personality, people might see my face, but like, I don't have to clock into work every day and be on a camera. Like, I can just be on a mic. And I saw how, radio personalities, they had different segments where, of course, it's their job. They have to they have to follow a certain script. But I was also intrigued by the fact that, for the most part, they could still get on the mic and talk about things that they wanted to talk about. And circling back around to the blog that I had, I'm like, okay, blogging is cool, but I really want to be able to just express myself in a way in which I feel as if I'm not structuring, sentences in a certain way, and then I have to proofread it, and you know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like podcasting is a medium where I can still express myself, but it's just like less restriction. Like, I feel like I can have more freedom with it, and that's why I'm really excited to do this podcast. Pretty sure I already said that, but yeah. So, what else can I say about me? Oh, so circling back around to after I graduated college, once the pandemic hit, what's the word? I essentially was laid off. They were like, obviously we don't want to lay off all of the people that we're laying off, but like at this moment, like, while everything is kind of like up in the air, like we can't really afford to, pay you guys to be here, especially when like we aren't having events and everything. Like, this is when the pandemic was happening type shit. But I had this whole plan of me working my way up from being a promotions assistant to, eventually being, hopefully a personality of some sort, for the station or, any of the stations, because Radio 1 was a big umbrella of, different stations under it. But, yeah. And there's a Radio 1 out here in Atlanta. So after I graduated from college in 2020, I always knew that I wanted to move to Atlanta. But after I graduated, and the pandemic especially, like, put me in that period of like, okay, I really have time to myself to just think and figure out what it is I want to do with my life. I'm like, okay, I know now is the time for me to get serious about saving and moving to Atlanta, because I feel like the longer I allow myself to stay here, like, I'm not gonna leave, and no knock to my city. I love my city. I really do. I know that my city loves me back. My city has contributed a lot to who I am and where I am today, especially with the music. But regardless of anything, even as a jit, like, I knew that I did not want to live in Indianapolis all of my life. And it's so crazy to me when I tell people that I'm from there. Like, motherfuckers would be like, what's there? Like, Indianapolis is not a Atlanta, LA, you know what I'm saying? So, like, even if you're not from that, like, that there's nothing really there. But, like, actually living there all your life, I'm like, yeah, bruh, I want something more. But I feel like even if I was to grow up in a city like a LA or Atlanta, like, I feel like regardless of where you're from, I encourage everybody to move out of the city that they're from. Everybody. I don't give a fuck where you're from. Like, you should want to get out and see more of the world. Like, there's so much more than just your city. But yeah, so I always knew I wanted to leave Indianapolis. And I just realized that I didn't start this timer again. I'm like, this motherfucker been saying 29 minutes for a minute. So I don't even know how long this episode is now at this point. But again, I'm going to try to not make this motherfucker too long. But yeah, so I always knew I wanted to move out of Indianapolis. And it wasn't always Atlanta. I told myself that I wanted to move to New York just because of like aesthetics. Like I feel like just culturally, like New York always intrigued me. But first visiting New York, I was like, fuck no. Absolutely not. No offense to my New York people, but it's definitely not my vibe. And immediately after that, I was like, I can really see myself in Atlanta because, like I said, I'm big on community. I feel like Atlanta, like just from the outside looking in, like I feel like Atlanta folks, the way that they come together, I'm like, I would love to be a part of, you know, a community like that. Like I feel like people out here in Atlanta are I don't want to say more supportive, but they're very supportive. Of course, I don't want to say everybody out here supports everybody, but for the most part, I feel like Atlanta is a very community-focused city. And obviously, too, once I realized music is what I wanted to do, I'm like, it would only make sense for me to move to Atlanta as far as, you know, it also being cost-effective because, of course, I could move somewhere like a LA or something like that. But, like, just speaking on LA, I don't see myself as someone that would enjoy being in LA. Like, I like visiting. I might have a vacation home, but LA has never intrigued me in a way of like, oh, I want to move to LA. Like, fuck no. But, yeah, so graduated 2020. I was like, all right, now I'm really about to, like, lock the fuck in and make a plan. And I told myself that winter, I literally told myself in 2020, once like the pandemic and everything was happening, I'm like, this is my last winter in that. Kid you not, that following year, I ended up walking the stage a year later in 2021. And after I graduated and like, it finally like felt real, like, okay, that chapter of my life is now closed. Immediately after that, I moved out here September of 2021, and I've been out here since. So it's now 2023, meaning it's been a little over a year now of me living out here in Atlanta. And I gotta give all thanks and praise to God for not only leading me out here, but keeping me out here because I done had a close one. I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. I'm not gonna shame anybody though that leaves from where they're from and move out somewhere and then, you know, they have to go back to, you know, where they're from. Like, I don't shame anybody for that because first and foremost, I'm not one to judge anybody's path or what the fuck they got going on. But also too, like, it takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to pack up your whole fucking life and move to a different city. I feel like sometimes, and it's not my business, I feel like sometimes people just be so quick to move just to like impress other people or like they're running away from the life that they have back home. Like I feel like a lot of people do certain shit for the wrong reasons and then that's the reason why the shit don't work out. But again, not my business. I really care less what the fuck motherfuckers got going on for real. But as for me, I know that God led me out here. Like, I knew that I wanted to live out here, but I prayed on it, and God was like, yeah, that's the move. That's where I want you to go. And I'm like, okay, cool. And another reason, too, why I chose Atlanta was it kind of speaks on the point that I made about community. But I know when I went to college, I really wanted to go to a HBCU, but I didn't have the money to go to a HBCU. So I'm like, wherever I move, I want to be intentional about being surrounded by people that look like me. And not only people that look like me, but people who I know will inspire me. Like, I want to be able to wake up in a city where I feel like it's just a community of motherfuckers that look like me. And I'm inspired waking up every day. You feel me? Like, just watching people out here, how they move, how they grind, how they hustle, everything folks be having going on. Like, motherfuckers be having 2, 3, 4, 5 businesses out here. Like, just the shit that motherfuckers be on out here, like, it's very inspiring. So I'm like, if I move somewhere, like, that's really what I want to look for. Like, being surrounded by my people. And just circling back to, you know, like a LA or a New York. Like, New York is pretty diverse. It's like a melting pot. But like LA, depending on where you are, like, it's not gonna always be Black people everywhere you go. But yeah, so that's another reason too why I was drawn to Atlanta. So shout out to my Atlanta folks. Born and raised here. Shout out to my Atlanta folks that are born and raised here. That's what I was saying. So yeah, I'm not from here, but I love y'all city. I fuck with what y'all got going on out here. And obviously, since I'm out here, if you're listening to this podcast, regardless if you're from here or not, if you live out here, let's connect. But yeah, so like I said, as a kid, I grew up, pretty quiet, pretty to myself, and writing was my outlet. And I feel like in my head, like, I always knew that I would be somebody one day, and people always tell me that, like, you're gonna be somebody special one day. Like, just knowing, like, how you love, to write, like, your voice is gonna be important. Like, that was something that I always, like, intuitively knew, and, like, people told me that. But I feel like just because of the childhood I had, or just, like, different experiences that I had, like, I feel like it kind of pushed me into this space of being afraid to use my voice, and being afraid to, like, truly step into my power in my voice, because it was times where I was made to feel like my voice didn't matter, if I'm being completely honest. And, just, like, different experiences that I've went through in life in general. Like, I feel like I've had to, like, learn, my value or improve my self-esteem over time. So I can honestly say, like, music specifically, like, me finally finding the courage to, like, put my music out, because I finally had, like, wrote something that I was proud of, and I was like, I gotta put this motherfucker out. Like, I put it out, like, still being nervous about how I would be perceived, but the fact that I received such, like, an overwhelming, like, response of, like, nah, bruh, you need to keep dropping music. Like, once I had got that as confirmation, like, I feel like my confidence, in a way, came from music. Like, people was like, oh, like people were looking at me like, oh, you're super confident and da-da-da-da. And, like, low-key, a bitch was, like, faking it till she was goddamn making it. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. But I also realized that a lot of the confidence, or, like, the validation that I was receiving from music I was taking it in an unhealthy way. Like, I knew that my confidence in me validating myself had to come from within and not from music. And I do feel like that's another reason too why God pulled me away from the music. Of course, like I said, this podcast is something that I've always wanted to do, and I've always been interested in multiple different things. But I can definitely say that another reason why I'm now shifting and pivoting off of music is because of that. Like, I feel like a lot of, like, my confidence and validation was coming from music. And I feel like once I was not seeing the results that I really wanted to see with my music, I got frustrated, and I kind of, like, equated that to my worth a little bit. Even though, obviously, you feel me, like, I know I'm hard and shit, but, like, it's easy to, like, question, like, okay, well, damn, like, you feel me? Like, I'm seeing other people make it. Like, you feel me? Like, why can't I make it? Especially when you feel like the motherfuckers that's making it not really passionate about this shit or good. But that's subjective. And what's for me is always going to be for me. So I've grown out of that. You feel me? Like, I don't give a fuck what motherfuckers got going on, for real. Like, in your heart whether or not you intentional, or, you really got a passion for the shit that you're doing. That ain't got nothing to do with me. And I know at the end of the day, my path is already written, and God already has blessings in store for me with my name on it. So I honestly don't want shit anybody else got. I don't want your life. I don't want nothing. You feel me? I want what God wants for me. And yeah, I really wish I knew how long this goddamn episode is already. I could get up and look, but Yeah, no. I really want to say some more about myself, but I don't know what else to say. I feel like that's enough, though, as far as what you guys already know. I already said in school I was the quiet, to myself type of kid. By the time I got to high school, color guard was something that I ended up getting into. If you aren't familiar with what color guard is, because when I say that, I often find myself explaining to people what it is. When I say color guard, a lot of people think ROTC, and it's not what it is. That's a type of color guard, like the type that people are thinking about, but that's not the type of color guard that I did. I was the girls with the flags on the football field with the band when we were performing. So literally went through band camp, was with the marching band, but I was a part of the color guard. And I feel like that's kind of what helped me get more comfortable with performing. So like once I got into music and I was like doing shows and shit, I'm like, me performing in front of people was really not even anything new, because before doing music, I was doing poetry and poetry competitions. But before that, I was doing color guard. And color guard, like, it wasn't nerve-wracking performing because it wasn't just me. Like, it was me plus the other girls on the team plus the goddamn marching band. You feel me? Like, the focus wasn't on me. Like, I was like a small percentage a part of this entire ensemble. You hear me? You get what I'm saying? You feel me? I was trying to say both of those two things at once. But yeah, in high school I did color guard. Also did class act, which was kind of like a women's empowerment, like girls group. Shout out to Miss Mason. I love you. What else did I do? I know like in middle school I did like student council and shit. What else was I into? I don't know. Like, I was a music enthusiast, of course. I used to like cut up clothes and like customize like shorts and shit. Like, I would take like different type of like fabrics and shit. Like, I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. I'm really about to list out all of the things that I wanted to be growing up, but I'm just trying to give y'all a picture of the shit that I was into growing up in school. But yeah, I feel like that's pretty much all I did in high school. Once I went to college, of course, BSA, Black Student Association. I went to like meetings here and there for shit in college, but I really wasn't committed to anything besides APO, Alpha Phi Omega. Shout out to Delta Psi. Co-ed service fraternity, for those who are not familiar with what APO is. I also pledged Sigma Alpha Iota my last year. And for those who are not familiar with that, sorry, I just quickly thought about something. And I don't want to lose it. Okay, yeah, so that is a music sorority that I didn't find out about until I was about to leave Ball State. So, yeah. But yeah, I pledged both of those two things. And what else? I also founded an organization. That's how y'all know how humble I am. Like, that wasn't even the first thing that I thought of. But also too, like, growing up in church, we briefly had like a drill team. I also praise danced in church in addition to singing in the choir, by the way. So I kind of was like in a little bit of everything that had something to do with music. So like, I'm not a dancer, but definitely praise danced, did drill team, did color guard. And through me doing drill team at church and through me doing drill team in high school, I'm like, I want to go to college and step. But of course, I didn't go to an HBCU. So when I got to Ball State, I'm like, nobody's really stepping. There would be yard shows or I guess step shows that was put on by D9 orgs, but I'm like, Me personally, I knew that I didn't want to pledge any of those organizations just to be able to step. I'm not going to lie, I looked into possibly pledging, but I wasn't really like completely so like it wasn't in my mind like, oh, I want to go to college and pledge. You know, like me pledging what I did is kind of just something that I fell into because I felt like I met genuine people within those orgs, and it made me think like, oh, like hell yeah, I would want to be a part of y'all shit, you know? But yeah, so when I got to Ball State, I'm like, okay, they don't have a step team, and I'm not about to pledge these people organization just off the strength of the fact that I know I want to step. You feel me? So I took it upon myself to look into how to create my own organization on campus. And I did that shit. And I created a step team at Ball State called Red Print Step Team. And that is my legacy at Ball State. So to know that I created something at Ball State that's still flourishing beyond my time at Ball State, it's pretty awesome. But yeah, like I said, like I always knew that I was into different things. I always knew that I was a leader. I just felt like, you know, I had to find like my way. Shout out to my song, Finding My Way. Stream Finding My Way by Kendall. But yeah, like I know like there's different type of leaders. Like you can be a quiet leader. But yeah, like I really do feel like I'm just at this place now where I'm just coming more into my own as a person, and I feel like a lot of things are just coming back around full circle, and I'm happy to be here. I love it here. And yeah. Oh, I told y'all I was gonna like tell y'all what I wanted to be growing up, and I'm gonna also tell y'all like what my major changes were, and I'm gonna end the podcast this episode. So growing up, the first thing I remember wanting to be was, I don't know if this is going to be in order, but obviously growing up as a kid, being into writing and reading, I remember as a kid wanting to be an author. I'm like, I want to be able to write my own books and publish them, especially once I found out what Wattpad was and was going crazy on that bitch. I was like, yeah, I can see myself as an author. And although that's not going to be the sole occupation that I have, I do still want to be a published author. That is a goal of mine. But yeah, I really wanted to be an author as a kid. And then I kind of grew out of that as I kind of grew out of reading. And like I said, I really want to start the book club for the podcast because I really do want to get back into reading just for myself. But yeah, like, I don't know why I got tired of reading. Like, it was something that I genuinely loved to do, like, outside of school. Like, you know how school would, like, force you to read and shit? Like, I just didn't want to read the shit that they wanted us to read. Like, the fuck? I'll read, but I don't want to read this shit. You feel me? But I don't know. I just feel like as a kid, I just eventually grew out of wanting to read. And that's what made me grow out of wanting to be an author. But also, too, like, somebody kind of planted like a seed in my mind. Ironically, you know, with me titling this podcast Keys and Seeds, I'm going to be talking about, you know, reprogramming the mind. Pause. Again, Jesus. Part 3 to episode 2 and action. But yeah, so with the title of this podcast being called Keys and Seeds Podcast, of course, I'm going to be talking about reprogramming the mind. And of course, you know, with that, discussing, you know, different seeds that might have been planted within my mind that I am learning how to uproot. But I literally remember as a kid wanting to be an author, and then someone planted this seed in my mind of making me feel as if that's not possible, or not that it wasn't possible, but somebody was like, I vividly remember somebody telling me as a kid, you know, like, unless you create something like Harry Potter, or, you know, you create, you know, a book that, you know, really becomes like a hit, like, you weren't gonna really make much money off of being an author. Like, somebody planted in my seed that authors don't really make a lot of money unless they win big with, you know, like a Harry Potter series type of thing, you know? And I remember that kind of stuck with me, because I'm like, damn, like, authors really be like putting their heart and soul into these goddamn books, and because it's not like a super big hit, like, they not making money. But I'm like, shit, I mean, I could see how that would make sense if I feel like a library is full of books that motherfuckers can check out for free. You feel me? Like, how are these authors consistently being paid for their work, you know? Like, as a kid, like, it did make me think, like, damn, like, maybe I can't be an author then. Because, of course, like, I want to do what I love, but I also want to be successful and make money from it, you know? But I remember I wanted to be an author. And then, this is, like, super random, but I wanted to be an architect as well. Like, I vividly remember, like, taping, like, printer paper together and, like, drawing out, like, floor plans and shit, and, like, drawing out different, like, business ideas. Like, I remember, like, riding in the car with my mom, and, like, we would see, like, spaces that would be for rent, and I would imagine, like, what would be in those type of businesses. Like, oh, okay, like, what would that business be? Or, like, for example, in that, we have malls that could be better. And, like, I would literally, like, try and, like, map out a floor plan and, like, imagine, like, how the malls would be if they were better. And I would, like, draw up, like, apartment complexes and shit. Like, I don't know where that came from, but I vividly remember wanting to be an architect. And then what steered me off that path was knowing that you had to be good at math. And I'm like, I can be good at counting some money, but, like, math was really not my thing. Like, measurements and fractions and all that shit, I was like, yeah, nah, maybe that's not for me. But then, of course, I naturally grew out of that as well. I also thought that I wanted to be a model. Growing up watching America's Next Top Model, I fucking loved that show. And, you know, like, you guys see my hair. Like, as a kid, like, the length that my hair is now, like, this has always been the length of my hair. Like, my hair has always been long. And literally as a kid, people would always play in my mind, like, oh my God, you're so pretty. You got long, pretty hair. Da, 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 da. Like, people used to always tell me, like, you should model, you should model, you should model. And of course, you know, as a kid, like, you have confidence in yourself and you like yourself up until, you know, people tell you that you shouldn't like yourself. But I wanted to be a model, and then eventually I grew out of that because I started to develop low self-esteem. And also, too, I'm like, I don't know how to walk in heels. I was just like, you know, maybe I don't want to be a model, or, you know, maybe I can't be a model, you know? But yeah, after that, I think I wanted to be a journalist. I think that was, like, the next thing after that. Yeah, I vividly remember wanting to be a journalist, but I still wasn't, like, completely sold on it. Like, I kind of went through a period of, like, no, before I wanted to be a journalist, I vividly remember wanting to be an athletic trainer. And speaking of that, I have on my goddamn Warriors football. I don't know if y'all can see it. I have on my goddamn Warriors football from Warren. And I got this working as a personal trainer. I'm not even into sports. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. But that was something that I got into too in high school. I don't even remember how I got into it. But, like, it was something that was fun. I enjoyed, like, and what's interesting is that I currently work as a caregiver. So, like, I've always had this heart of, like, you know, I want to help people, you know, nurse them back to health kind of thing. So, like, I vividly remember also wanting to be an athletic trainer at one point. Like, I thought it would be cool to also be able to, like, travel the world but also too, like, be, on the sidelines, like helping them, wrap up, their injuries and everything. That was something that I really wanted to do. But then, like, I realized that I had to take anatomy for that. Or not that I had to, but, like, I was taking anatomy classes for that. And anatomy was kicking my ass. And this was high school. And I'm like, if this shit difficult now and I just don't see myself getting over this hump, I'm definitely not about to go to college and take this shit. So I was like, yeah, nah. So I went into college, wanted to be a journalist. Told myself that I wanted to be a music journalist because I'm like, okay, I really don't want to make something that's a hobby to me and something that I enjoy my job, because I feel like I would get tired of it, or at least with writing. So I kind of was like on the fence about being a journalist, but I'm like, I could see myself as a music journalist. But going off into college, of course, like they didn't have like a specific, you feel me? Like it was just journalism. And me being forced to write about shit that I really didn't want to write about, it made me not like writing anymore. Like, period. Like, I noticed myself not wanting to write anymore. And I'm like, oh, yeah, nah. Writing is me. You feel me? Like, just because I don't want to write about the shit y'all got me writing about, that doesn't mean that I'm about to just stop writing altogether. So I was like, yeah, no, I got to change this. So I ended up changing this to public relations just like as a safety net, because a lot of the classes overlapped and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I know I didn't still want to be in journalism. So I briefly changed my major to public relations, convinced myself like maybe I can be a music publicist. But I was like, yeah, nah, this shit's still not hitting. And so I kind of just like had a talk with myself. I remember my junior year, like, okay, I'm about to have one more year. Like, what the fuck do I really want to do with my life? And around that time, obviously, I was into music. I was into writing. Was writing music, but didn't really feel like it was good. But I'm like, if I could be any version of myself that I picture myself as, free of fear, free of feeling as if I'm not confident or shit is not good enough, like, what do I really see myself doing? And music is what I saw myself doing. And for the longest, I was just like, nah, like, I want to be the person behind the scenes. Like, I didn't want to do anything that I felt would, like, put me directly in front of people, because I just had this fear of just, like, not being good enough, not being confident enough, like, being perceived in a way in which I don't want to be perceived. Like, I dealt with that so much. But I'm like, I don't want to be one of those people that look up and I'm on my deathbed like, damn, I wish I would have done this differently. I wish I would have done this, you know? So I was just like, fuck it. Let me put the music out. And then now we're here. And that eventually turned into me wanting to still start up this podcast. That was an idea that I always still had. And now things are coming back around full circle. And yeah, so public relations is not what I graduated with as far as my major. So I ended up, after having that conversation with myself, I'm like, okay, boom. I think if I'm going to do music, it would only make sense for me to still be here. If I'm going to make music and I'm still going to be here in college pursuing a college career. And what's crazy is I hated college and I didn't want to go. But like, that was planted within me too. Like a seed of like, you got to go to college. Like, that's the next thing that makes sense. And I'm like, I really don't want to go to college, but I'm like, I didn't know what else I wanted to do with my life. So I kind of just went to college just off the strength of feeling like that was expected of me at the time. And at that point, I'm like, I'm a junior, about to be a senior. Like, okay, yeah, like, why waste another year of my time if I really don't want to be here? But at the same time, too, I'm like, fuck it. I already spent goddamn 3 years here. I might as well finish, you know? So I'm like, okay, if I know music is what I want to do and I'm still about to be here, I feel like if I'm still about to be here, I might as well make it make sense and change my major to audio production. But audio production was the concentration for the major, and the major itself was TCOM, telecommunications. So that was an umbrella of radio broadcasting, television and radio. And then within that, we learned different shit like Photoshop, how to code, things of that nature. So I'm actually pretty grateful that it was a broad overview of what the fuck it was about. But the concentration was audio production. And walking away from school, yes, I learned a lot, but I don't feel like it truly prepared me for shit. It didn't prepare me for shit. But of course, like I said, I had this whole plan of, I'm gonna work my way up at Radio 1 and da-da-da-da. But then obviously the pandemic happened, and it was hard for me to find internships too before the pandemic even happened. So I don't even want to really use that as an excuse. But by the time I graduated, like, I really didn't know what the fuck was next or what the fuck I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to do music. But this entire time that I've been doing music, I kind of too have been feeling guilty about not using my degree, because I'm like, damn, like, I spent all this time, all this money, still paying student loans, and I'm not even using this fucking degree. And my full-time job that I'm working right now is caregiving. And that's something that I kind of just like stumbled into. Like, I always had a heart for caring for people, but like, I got into caregiving because I knew somebody who could help me get into the field during a time that I was looking for a job while this whole pandemic shit was happening, and I was no longer working at Radio 1. And obviously, everything happens for a reason, and I can clearly see for myself why I'm in caregiving, why God has me, in this season. But yeah. So I've been feeling guilty about not using my degree and, not working harder to get back into radio, knowing that that's something that I could see myself like actually doing for a full-time job if I'm not doing music yet. But like, I feel like God too kind of just like put it in my head, like, start your own shit. You do music. You feel me? Radio stations play music. You feel me? You already the personality. Like, start your own shit. Stop waiting to have a seat at somebody else's table. Stop working to build up somebody else's shit. Build your shit. You feel me? And that's where I'm at now. Super excited again to be here, creating this podcast and pursuing this creative endeavor. And yeah, looking ahead, episode 3 will be about me recapping my 2022, what I learned, what I'm taking away from it, what I'm leaving, and giving you guys an update on my 2023, my goals as it relates to this podcast and as it also does not. And yeah, giving you guys more of an update on, as of recently, what last year was for me and what I'm hoping 2023 will be. So with that being said, of course, be sure to follow the pod at Keys Exceeds Pod. And as always, knowledge and kindness is key. I'm out.